All right. Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is an amazing way for you to exit highly appreciated assets, businesses, real estate, land, eliminate the need for the 1031 exchange so you can create and preserve more wealth and do it on your terms at your timing. When it makes sense for you. We're also streaming on so you can create and preserve more wealth or help your clients, friends, and family do the same. We're also streaming on expert CRE secrets as well, where we're talking with some of the best commercial real estate experts we believe in the world to help you create and preserve more wealth through investment real estate. For those who don't know me, my name is Brett Swarts, and I'm the host of Capital Gains Tax Solutions. I'm also the founder of CapitalGainsTaxSolutions.com or Capital Gains Tax Solutions. You can find us at CapitalGainsTaxSolutions.com. I'm excited about our next guest. He is out of the great state of Colorado, and he's on a mission to help create freedom through real estate investing. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive on structuring seller financing deals, but we're going to talk about all things kind of real estate, building wealth. And he's also the founder of Front Range Land. And he started his investment journey at the age of 16, and he's managed to build an impressive real estate business and portfolio that allows him the freedom to live and work where he wants within his 20s. Please welcome to the show with me, Dan. And I'm going to let you pronounce the last name because I've already forgot it.
That's okay. Dan Haberkost. Thanks for having me, Brett.
Yeah. And Dan, for our listeners to get to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah, sure. So quick background, the reference to being 16, I was managing a portfolio of rentals for my boss at the time, along with his farm, while he would spend most of the year in Aruba, and did that through high school. That taught me all about the sort of real estate I do not want to own. C- properties at best, very confrontational dynamic with his tenants. Wasn't a very pleasant experience. Lots of, nasty rentals that had been trashed that I had to go deal with. So did that through high school and college. I worked full time, went to school full time, and it was around 20 years old that I said, all right, how do I take this experience? How do I take, by 21, I've been managing people for 5-6 years, running other people's businesses. So I thought, I haven't had a whole lot of fun in high school and college, but I can certainly take this experience and apply it to some sort of investing or business once finished with school and build something. And so I started reading different books, listening to podcasts, and like everyone else, it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That was kind of the light bulb moment. And so shortly after reading that, I went and bought a duplex just as a house hack. I was still in Ohio, bought it there, Parma, Ohio, for anyone who's familiar with the Cleveland area. And then I moved to Colorado, bought another house hack, renting out all the rooms that as I lived in it, just single family. And it was around that time that I realized the low and no money down stuff is nice for one or two investments. But if you really want to build a portfolio of real estate, it really helps to figure out how to make a substantial income. And so I started looking at different active businesses I could start. Should I get my real estate license or try and go be a wholesaler? What should I do? And I met a guy at the local real estate meetup here in Colorado Springs, that had been doing land and development all across the United States, really, for 45 years. And I would drive an hour south every weekend, go meet with him, helping in his business, just kind of follow him around, really, and learn from him. And eventually we started doing deals together. I'd help him find the land for the new builds. I'd help him just manage and put together the new builds. And over time, I just started doing it myself. And so that's where Front Range Land came from. The simplest explanation of that business is just a giant marketing funnel going direct to seller for land. Many of the lots we flip, some for cash, some for terms, and then a couple at a time, I'll put spec homes on. And so that's the active business, which feeds the acquisition of rental properties.
Excellent, Dan. Wow, there's so much there, and we'll be diving into a lot of it here in a minute. By the way, if you want to learn more about Dan, you can go to Haberkost.com. I'm going to spell that for you. And Dan is pretty straightforward, but the last name is Haberkost.com. Okay, excellent. So before we go into structuring seller financing deals and some of the secrets you learned to build some wealth in creative ways with land development, I want to take one other step back, Dan. I believe we've all been given certain gifts in this life. Some people call them strengths, some people call them superpowers. I'm curious, when you were 16, what was the one thing that people would say perhaps that, was your strength or superpower, or the two things?
I've always been able to speak as if I'm much, much older than I am. I can't do my own accounting. That's not a strong suit. I'm not good with anything detail oriented, but I have always been very much able to speak articulately and confidently.
Excellent. So communication and do it in a good way and a great way to connect with people that are older than you. I think that helps you to build wealth. It makes sense, Dan. So let's dive right into the topic at hand, which is structuring seller financing deals. So Dan, what is the number one secret to structuring seller financing deals?
The number one secret. If we're talking about you selling on seller financing, we can hit that first just to be clear. I would say one of the biggest things is to make sure that you're doing your due diligence on the person to make sure they are going to be able to pay and or getting a large enough down payment that it doesn't really matter. And so let me give you an example. I bought one a couple of years ago, just a piece of land. It was a multifamily lot at $13,500, sold it at 38, and she put 15,000 down. So my money was completely out just after the initial down payment, and then been getting $500 a month on that since. And so in that case, I didn't screen her really hard because the down payment was more than what I even had into it. In other cases, when I've sold land with lower down payments, which is often a great strategy if you're struggling just to get it moved, I'll go on a land contract or contract for deed where it stays in my name, in the company's name until they pay it off. So it's much easier to take back if there's any sort of problem. So those are probably the main thing that comes to mind.
Excellent. So it sounds like if you are the seller and you are selling, you're going to be financing the buyer. The number one secret to structuring these types of seller financing deals is to make sure that you're doing due diligence on the person and make sure they can pay as much as you can. Like, you're being thoughtful about that. But even more so, or coupled with that, just make sure it's a large enough down payment where essentially you're getting all or most of your money that you put into the deal anyways, if they don't pay, because you're just going to foreclose on them. Is that a fair summary, Dan?
Yeah, exactly.
What would be the second secret to structuring seller financing deals? It could be from the buyer's perspective, or it could be just in general for approaching people to make deals.
Yeah, the other thought is people often are fixated just on the price and or monthly payment. And so, selling land on terms, you can get really substantial interest rates most of the time if you're giving them what they want, price or terms wise. So, an 8 to 12% interest rate is very typical.
Interesting. So so if I'm hearing you're saying, so either someone's typically focused on the price, which perhaps means you can negotiate a little bit lower interest rate because they got their higher price, or they're really focused on the cash flow. In that scenario, maybe it's a lower price and a much higher interest rate. Is that what you're referring to, Dan?
Well, I was saying, again, more from the perspective of you're selling the land. A good negotiating tool is they get fixated on they only want to pay X price or they only want to pay X amount every month. And so you can charge a really substantial interest rate. But your point is also true on the flip side, where if you're trying to buy on terms, people still get fixated on a number, whether it's a lot of times it's the price. And so they'll give you low interest rates if you give them their price. And so I can give you an example of that if you'd like.
Yeah, please. That'd be great.
Got a rental on seller financing a couple years ago where he had $250 just stuck in his head as the price he wanted. Couldn't get him down on that, but got 3% interest only for 2 years, at which point it transitions to a permanent mortgage at 3%. So especially now, that's quite an asset, having 3% debt on just a solid rental here in town when interest rates are 7-8%.
Wow. Okay. Make sure I got that. So you said, fine, we'll give you the 250, although perhaps you don't think it's worth, so you guys aren't coming to a great compromise. But the compromise was he would, or you would, I'm quite sure, 3% IO for 2 years.
Yep.
And then it was fixed for what? For how many years?
And then it's a 15-year straight line amortization loan, just a normal mortgage, 3%.
At 3%. Yeah. Then then it's just fully AM, but for 15-year AM. At 3%. So it went from IO just to full AM at 15.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great point, especially if interest rates are where they're at now.
Yeah.
So how do you, and so I'm sorry, were you the buyer on that? I didn't
Yes, that's one I bought. That's a rental property.
Right. Oh, that's a rental property. Okay. Right. So interesting. So he happened to own it free and clear. Is that what happened on that one?
Yep.
So talk about when you're approaching deals or finding deals or attracting those sellers to pick up the phone call and call you. What are you doing to attract those leads?
All of our marketing is, or almost all of our marketing is mail, and then a small portion of it's cold calling. but mail is the primary source of leads for us. And I'm speaking to Front Range Land, but getting land deals there. That's where we do a lot of direct to seller marketing.
Okay. So you're sending the mail, and then the mail shows up and it says, hey, are you considering selling? Would you consider selling on terms? Whatever your creative copy is. And then the call, A, what is that typically the creative copy? How does it go? And B, what is the secret to getting them to take action on that copy?
Yeah, great question. So it's interesting. The avatar that we most often buy land from at a discount is not distressed. It's very different than housing. It tends to be somebody who bought the land, a decade, 2 decades ago. They bought it on pennies on the dollar, or 4 pennies on the dollar relative to what it's worth today. And so for them, they just want legitimacy and convenience, because there are so many people calling, texting, emailing them every day trying to buy their land that does not or do not actually have money. And so they are sick of it and they just want legitimacy. So the big tagline on ours is, tired of fake offers, we send proof of funds. And that gets us deals all day long. We have a frequently asked question sheet. We send a standardized email template with the contract, the proof of funds, our title company's contact, just a description of the whole process. That has really, really worked for us, because so much of the competition is just wasting people's time trying to assign contracts with no money.
Interesting. So I like that. So it's the main pain point, tired of fake offers, right? And then it's literally like your bold statement or promise, like we send proof of funds. And then on top of that, then you're showing like all of your guys' team, like picture of you and your contact information, picture of the title company and their contact information, picture of whatever, right? So there's all these legitimate people that are doing business. Is that a fair summary, Dan?
Yeah. It's not me doing it anymore. I have acquisition managers, but yes, in concept, exactly.
Okay, good. And then what is the call to action at that point? Are they picking up the phone to call you guys and someone's answering? Or okay, go ahead.
Yep.
Oh, okay, simple. And then someone answers the phone. That's the account manager to help work on that deal.
Exactly. Yep. Very, very straightforward. It's a simple process. It's occasionally distressed, but I would say, 85%, 90% is, upper middle class to wealthy and apathetic. And again, this is specifically speaking to land sellers that I'm dealing with. We're dealing with.
How would it change if it was like multifamily or like, other properties types?
I personally, in my business, have not done a ton of direct to seller marketing for multifamily, so I can't speak to that as much, but seeing friends of mine who've built businesses entirely off of going direct to seller for single family, it's a lot of distress. It's a lot of, hey, we need to close now. Something's wrong. They're out of money. It's a totally different scenario most of the time.
It's interesting, right? It's more distress if they're actually going to do it, because if they're not distressed, they're probably going to list it through a broker.
Exactly.
Right. And I guess in the sense of land sales, if you're dealing with deals that are, I don't know, 100 to 300,000, maybe that's your range. I'm not sure. Perhaps not many brokers going to be listing those, or am I reading too much into that, or what's your strategy on that?
That's partially true, but a lot of it, again, is just think about it. If you're 75 years old, you bought this 15 years ago, you have plenty of money. You don't want to deal with listing it and taking offers. And if someone just gets it done for you, where all you have to do is sign when the notary shows up, sure, I'll take it. Their time's more important than their money.
Makes sense. Okay, there it is. The time is more important than money. Perhaps that might be a tagline. Hey, your time is more important perhaps than whatever the headache that you might have. Give us a call. We'll talk through our options. So, all right. So then how do you make money now? So you bought the thing for $250, right? And now what are you doing? Are you going to turn around and sell that on terms to someone else for a higher interest rate, or walk me through that?
Yeah. So 3 ways. A lot of times we'll just flip them for cash. So that's a big part of the business. It's nice to have some note payments coming in. So we'll sell them on terms sometimes as well. And then the third avenue is just putting a house on it, putting a spec house on it. Now, I only do that here in Colorado, where it's close, where it's local, but I always have 2 to 3 new builds going. And that's been a great source of income too.
Interesting. So you kind of have 3 sources. They have the kind of continual cash flow of just the notes paying. You have ones that are flipping and maybe like doubles or triples, if you will. And then you have the longer term home runs that you're building longer term wealth. So you have those 3 buckets. Talk about how your mindset is with those and how you've built that over the years.
Yeah. Well, they're good complements of each other. And a lot of times it just comes down to the lots we get. So, in Colorado where we're building, when I would get lots that are completely flat between 2 houses, all utilities in place, as easy as it gets, those are just excellent ones to put houses on because they're shovel ready, right? For anyone that isn't familiar with land, if you want to take a piece of raw land and get it to that point, get it to the point where utilities are in place, entitlements are done, and you can go apply for a permit build, that takes a lot of time and effort, money and brain damage, honestly. And so focusing on that sort of land, most people don't realize that is not raw land. No. That is horizontally developed land. And so a lot of people don't realize that. When you see, 10 houses on a street with a couple lots interspersed in between, that sort of land is very, very different than, say, the field that's out east of Colorado Springs or wherever you might live. And so I focus on the infill stuff. And when you get those just square shovel ready lots, those are great to put houses on. And then as far as terms, it's harder to sell the infill product on terms because usually it's a builder who's going to build in the next year or two. And maybe they'll do terms for a year, but then they're going to pay it off, because I've had lots of notes pay off this year because I sold them to builders. And so recreational land tends to be a little better for selling on terms because just the usage of it, they don't have a loan that's going to come due on a new construction house where they're going to need to pay you off. And then as far as flipping, just buying and selling for cash, I mean, you can do that with any of the above, but it's just a nice complement to the other two. And that's what I do most right now, is just buying and selling for cash.
We're talking with Dan Haberkost. That's and you can find him at danhaberkost.com. That's cost with a K, K-O-S-T. Dan Haberkost. Oh, so, okay. So what I'm hearing, it sounds like highest and best use of the actual land itself. So you're looking at it and you go, hey, what's the highest and best use? Not only that, but also what's the highest and maybe most efficient and effective way to make money on this, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And take the path of least resistance. Don't force something if it doesn't need to be. You can just flip it, right? Or longer term, collect the payments if you're gonna turn around and just hold her for cash flow, or hey, let's build, because this thing is basically close to shovel ready. Is that a fair summary? Am I way off?
Exactly, spot on.
Okay. Yep. So talk about scaling now, right? So now you're doing this yourself, right? You learn from somebody else, you did it yourself, and then you're like, okay, you said a little bit earlier, I'm no longer the account manager or the, maybe the frontline, qualifier or setter. How have you effectively scaled perhaps your frontline sales force, or however that looks, to make your organization grow?
Yeah, the two biggest bottlenecks there are capital and manpower. Manpower can be tricky. Finding and retaining good salespeople is something I'm continually learning how to do. But ultimately, if you set this up right, it can be really appealing. You incentivize them properly with solid commissions. And, if you train them right, where they can be independent, it can be a great option for someone maybe with a wife and kids, because they can have freedom in their schedule. It doesn't have to be a rigid 9 to 5. And so both of the guys doing acquisitions for me fit that profile very well. They have new families, they're married, new kids, and so they love it because they can make good money, but have flexibility in their schedule and continually make more as they do better and get better. Then on the capital side of things, this is something I'm continually working on. So, I have way too much of my own cash in my business. I'm working on pulling that out. I have a big line of credit, but then I also have a number of investors. And it's a little bit of a mess the way I'm doing it right now. So I'm working on systemizing that, getting more of my cash out, pooling money, and having just a large chunk available at any and all times to continually buy and sell more lots, because I am not doing assignments, to be clear.
Okay, got it. Let's focus on the manpower one for a second, because I think that's really important, right? I mean, especially given the age we're in right now with the great resignation, right? And just everything that's been happening in the last couple of years. So I said a couple of things I want to flexibility. I want to hone in on, right? And they're head of acquisitions, which so I guess they're very specific. They are out there hunting for deals, right? To bring sellers in, right? To move those. You're representing you guys on the buy side to buy the land, right? So their focus looks like on the buy side, not on the sell side per se. But maybe if you can let them know. And then number two, is it like a salary plus
Exactly, substantial commission with a small base.
Yeah, with a small base. Okay. And how do you determine, what do you find the good ratio? If they're going to make X amount, is it, 50% is the commissioner, 80%, 70%? Like what's been a good,
70-ish?
yeah.
Yep.
So like 30% base, 70% more upside.
Approximately.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. What was the one thing that you wish you would have done differently when you hired your first kind of like sales, acquisition guy? It was like, oh, I wish I would have just done it that way the first time.
I would have done it sooner, and I would have hired them full time with a base salary immediately. My first acquisitions person was just commission only, which small-minded thinking on my part.
Got it. So full time with the base immediately, and just like you say, hey, just make the investment. Yep. By the way, I'm asking these questions personally because I'm moving towards that next big step, right? And so it's like this is like fresh in my mind and looking at it, and so it's and we work with strategic alliances that in a lot of ways they act as the outside sales force that bring us opportunities.
Sure.
But as we're scaling, I'm going, hey, wow, how do we, instead of me being the the frontline qualifier, closer, creating the leads or creating the content like we're doing now. So
Sure.
Yeah, it's really helpful. Cool. Now you mentioned capital real fast. So capital is interesting, Dan, right? So you said the bottleneck of your capital, meaning either financing stuff to get even probably on land deals, right? Almost impossible for outside bank financing, I'd imagine, right? Especially in today's day and age.
Yeah.
But when you said that, you mean so bringing and pulling more capital, so you like syndicate? Is that what you're referring to?
That's what I'm working on, is figuring out the best structure to do that. Because the way I've done it up to this point is I have all these investors and quite a bit of money collectively, but it's been just a joint venture on each one, right? So a note and deed of trust, and they fund it, and then there's a certain profit split, and that is way too cumbersome. It makes both the buy and sell more expensive, just as far as paperwork with the title company, and it's the pain in the ass. And so right now, this is something I'm very actively working on, is figuring out the best structure to just pool a large sum of money, because I could go send 100,000 mailers tomorrow if I had the cash in place to fund all those deals. Because number one, land is so simple, especially the land I'm doing, that my guys could take a huge volume of leads. And then number two, there are endless markets where dozens and dozens and dozens of lots are selling every week. And so that part's easy. It's just having the capital ready so we can deliver on the commitment of closing on all the deals that we do. So I'm working intensely on that right now.
Yeah. And I think maybe a fund model, right? Like they do for multi-family fund models and such. So that's interesting. So yeah, I'm curious if and when you figure all that out, maybe come back and share that. Lots of wisdom here. Dan, are you ready to move to the biggest frustration with the 1031 exchange round?
Sure.
All right. So I'm curious, Dan, and what is your biggest frustration for yourself or for clients when it comes to the 1031 exchange?
Oh gosh. I'm not a realtor, so I don't have clients, and I have kept all the buy and holds I've bought. The only thing I've sold are my spec homes. So to be very clear, because I like to be transparent, I've not done a 1031, but when I've watched others do it, when I've watched friends of mine do it, it's the time frame. Just the time frame. Having to identify a property so quickly often leads to bad decisions. So I would say that would be my answer.
Excellent. Yeah. So we call it the shotgun wedding, right? Where you're selling the house, you're selling the thing, and you're like, hey, I'm a developer, or I'm a land buyer. I don't want to sell my $500,000 or $1 million house and then turn around and have to buy $1 million equal or greater value in this short period of time. And now that's not my business. My business is selling and developing, right?
Yeah.
If there's a way to sell, defer the tax, and still develop, and with the capital all tax deferred, what would that mean for you, Dan?
Oh gosh, that would be very helpful. Taxes and mitigating taxes are a big part of what's on my mind right now, and so yeah, that would just save me a lot of money in taxes.
If people want to learn more about what I'm talking about, we can go to capitalgainstaxresearch.com. We have a way to eliminate the need for the 1031 exchange, especially if you're a developer like Dan. We just did a $13 million exit in California for developers. They develop car washes. So they buy like 2 acres of land, like an old taco stand, develop it to $4 million, sold it for 13. Wow. And just like Dan, they don't want to be in a position to buy a $13 million car wash. They want to go buy the land again at about $500,000 to $1 million, develop it up to 4, and then do that over and over again. And so they use the Deferred Sales Trust, one of our clients, and it's an amazing opportunity for them to create and preserve wealth on their own timing, no timing restrictions, no debt replacement requirements. You can buy land as long as it's investment property. You can build projects, build businesses. Go to capitalgainstaxsolution.com to learn more about that. That's taxsolutions.com. That being said, Mr. Dan, are you ready for the lightning round?
Let's do it.
All right. Knowing what you know now, if you could go back to your 15-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget? Make sure you tell yourself to do.
Oh gosh, get started immediately from the time you have the idea to the time you execute. Shorten that window and don't be so short-sighted with spending marketing dollars.
Okay. Number two, what's the number one book you've recommended or given the most in the past year?
Sapiens.
I've heard of it. That's the second time I heard that. I'm gonna check that book out. Actually, I got it on Audible. I just got to have to click play.
Okay.
Number three, what are you most curious about right now?
To the conversation about raising money, raising a large scale fund that ultimately I build a hard money lending company off of. That's the big vision there.
I like that idea. We could chat a little bit about that. I think that'd be cool. Number four, what's your number one leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
Oh, number one leadership quote or theme. Oh gosh, I don't know if this is appropriate for that question, but the biggest thing in my mind is just keeping the promises I make to myself. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Mm-hmm. Love it. What's the one big domino, if you could knock over the next 6 months, would make the biggest difference for your business?
Raising money at scale in a simplified manner.
Last question. After all your success, Dan, helping and building the wealth you've built with land, how do you stay centered with the practice or habit you practice to stay centered in your values and stay encouraged to charge forward to reach even higher heights?
I think that's just being really, really clear in my priorities. It's something I think a lot about. I spend a lot of time with older people who have not done this effectively. And so when I set my goals, when I set my calendar and plan, I always make sure the people that are important to me are at the top of the list. And those things are scheduled first and business comes second to that.
Dan Haberkost, it's been more than a pleasure. I'm thrilled that you were able to share, be with us and share so much wisdom with us. Thank you so much. I want to encourage you to keep using the gifts you've been given as being able to speak and communicate in an articulate way, in a way that can help people create and preserve more wealth with investment real estate, especially with land. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, would you mind one last time what's the best place for them to find you?
DanHaberkost.com.
Excellent. And our listeners, I want to thank you for listening to an episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, as well as also streaming Expert CRE Secrets. We appreciate everyone out there. We want to encourage you to take action today to invest, to get started. Everything Dan was talking about as well. If you have a opportunity to exit $1 million exit and $1 million proceeds on any kind of transaction, stock, crypto, business, real estate, want to have a saving a failed 1031 exchange, a primary home, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. You can check out our new book too, called Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. We have Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank in the book, and a number of other really smart people. I got a couple of chapters too. We just hit #1 bestseller, by the way, for wealth and real estate. So check that out on Amazon, or just go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com.